Alright, so, um, my name is Kimber. I just got out of the Air Force here recently. I was in for 9.5 years. I wanted to do a couple of videos on what are some things that are really important when you're separating, retiring, whatever it is, however you're getting out of the military. So I made a list of four things that are pretty important that you should be paying attention to when you get out of the military. Things that I've learned along the way, and then I'll probably do some other separate videos specific to whatever I'm talking about. So the first thing that I would suggest is your records. You want to make sure that any records that you have in your personal record data, whatever it's called, Prada, you want to go in there and you want to make sure everything that you had is loaded. All your EPRs, your decorations, any important documents. Make sure they're in there, make sure they're correct, because a lot of that stuff, when you submit for your DD-214, it's going to translate over to that. And you want to make sure all the information is correct beforehand, before you separate, because once you separate, they pretty much, it's hard to do anything, especially if you don't have base access anymore and you can't go to a local personnel section or whatever. So, and your certifications. So whatever training database that you have, you want to make sure all the certifications that you got are on there, especially if you plan on getting a job outside of the military that relates to whatever you were doing. So if, like me, if you were a crew chief and you decided, hey, I want to go work for a depot unit, and you want to make sure all of the tasks that you had that you were qualified on, that it translates over, so that way you have documentation that you already know how to do that, so you kind of can put that on your resume or whatever. Second thing is healthcare related. So I put in for voluntary separation under the pregnancy childbirth clause. So for anyone out there who is either pregnant or just recently had a baby, you can apply while you're pregnant or up to 12 months after you have your baby, and you can apply for early separation. So you apply for it, your commander says yay, nay, whatever, and then you go from there through the processes and pretty much having AFPC or whoever approve it. But when I applied, right after I applied, probably a week after, I had a medical appointment because I sprained my wrist doing something, and after I went in for a medical appointment, a couple days after that, I was looking at TRICARE online, and I was looking at my medical records and stuff like that, and I noticed that there was a weird code on me. I was like, what the heck is this? And I found out that I had a medical evaluation board code on me, which means that there was some sort of condition that I had that a doctor saw. It was not related to the appointment I had, and it wasn't even my primary doctor, that they saw, and they document. They say, hey, this person has this issue, and we think they need to be evaluated whether they stay in the military or not. Mind you, I already put in for my voluntary separation. So I had to go through all that, and I'll probably do a different kind of thing on medical evaluation boards. But what I was getting at is looking at, I totally went off track there, looking at TRICARE online for your health stuff, because when you go to get out, what I was getting at was your disability. So if you plan on applying for VA disability, even if you're getting med boarded, you want to take a look at your TRICARE online as well, because a lot of people don't know how to look at it. But if you look at it, you can look at all the appointments you've had, and they actually have a problem list on there. The problem list is what's documented. That's something that happened to you that is more serious of a matter other than like a cold. So if you sprained your wrist, if you have back issues, stuff like that, and you can go through, and that's where I went through initially to see, hey, I know I have these issues health-wise, let me see if they're documented or not, because I remember making an appointment, but the doctors don't always put in whatever you have are going there for, especially if you go there for two things at once. So like I said, you want to look at your problem list to make sure you have all that information down. The second thing would be, if you are going to file for VA disability, you want to, about, I would say, 6 months out from your separation date, or even your final out date, since you're probably going to take terminal leave, you want to go, and any bases that you were at, if you had appointments off base, you're going to want to contact the places off base and get all your records from them. So, for example, I had appointments off base here because I had a tonsillectomy, and I have really bad scoliosis, so I had appointments off base for that. I was in the hospital when I had my babies. I had to get my records for that. So you want to get all the records for that. Either you can go there physically if you're there, but not all the time they're going to be able to print off your documents. You're going to have to put a request in, and they're going to either mail them to you or email them to you. Along with that, you're going to, I don't think you need your orders, because you can request your medical records at any time, but the medical clinic that you're at, you're going to want to go in there to medical records and request your entire file. So they'll give you a copy on CD, and they'll have a printed file. The printed file, you're going to want to keep that with all the other records that you get. So if you look up whatever medical clinic you're at, you're going to have some sort of VA transition representative. They should be in the clinic. They were here at Hill Air Force Base. So this VA rep, what they pretty much do is they will look through all of your medical records with you. And I went there prepared with my list of things that I thought I could claim for disability, depending on what it was. And then she looks through your records, and she goes, okay, this, I see it documented here. Cool. She's like, hey, you don't have this down. Do you want to try and file for that? So I grind my teeth really bad. And I didn't have it down because I didn't think about it. I didn't think that would be anything I could be able to claim. But I was able to claim it, and I got diagnosed with TMJD. It's a joint in your jaw. Anyways, besides the point. So you'll fill out some paperwork with her, and she sends everything off for you. It is best to do this before you separate, because once you separate, they're not available to you. They're available to active duty personnel getting ready to separate. I'm not the information expert on any of this stuff. I'm just sharing my experiences with what I did and what some of my friends helped me decide to do. So I would definitely look into whatever VA rep that you have around you, whether it's on base or not, and they can help guide you. But you're going to want to look for someone in your medical clinic to help you file your claims, because it's easier to go through them, and it's going to be faster. So once you file once you send everything off, you're still going to be on active duty status before this happens. Depending on when you do it, you can do it between, I think they can do it 180 days out. So between 180 days and 90 days prior to your separation is the best time for them to do it. And when I did it, the VA was estimating around 127 days turnaround time to get through your claim and give you whatever rating you're going to get. Mind you, you won't know whatever rating you get for all the disabilities you put in for it until after you separate. So I separated on August 30th, and mine came through, I think, September 4th, but I saw mine online first, and they mailed me a copy of everything on the 9th of September. So, medical stuff is very, very, very important, especially if you are one of those people like I was sometimes with certain things. I didn't want to go to the doctor and get it documented, but I'm glad I did with certain things because I was able to claim it, and I'm going to be covered for that later because it's an injury that I got through the military. Even if it's something that you might not get any percentage on, they might rate you at 0, it's still good to have it on there, because if you have developed arthritis from it or something like that later in life, like I broke my collarbone when I was in the military in 2014, and they gave me it, but they gave me a 0% rating. so I can claim it later if I develop arthritis in there or something like that. All right, medical records, very important. And make sure you keep a copy of everything. And then what I was going with that was, once the representative sends all your stuff off, about a week or two later, you're going to get a call from usually the VA contracts out another company that books all of your appointments. So you're going to have like a general appointment with a doctor that goes off pretty much everything that you're claiming. Then you're going to have other specialists. So I had a general doctor. I had one for sleep apnea. You have like a psychologist depending on what you're claiming. Dentist. I went to a dentist because of my teeth grinding. Hearing. I went to an audiologist, and I want to say there was another one, but I don't remember what it was. So those are some things. And you'll learn about some of this stuff when you go through TAPS, but TAPS, good information. All the information doesn't apply to everyone, and some of it they don't go as in depth as I think they should. The VA, with the day they do VA briefings, you're going to want to really pay attention. They should give you a book, a bunch of information. Just make sure you keep it so that way you can reference it later, because it's really hard to get any information about VA stuff when you're in and when you get out. I'm still struggling to figure some things out, but that's why I wanted to put this out there so other people can kind of get a feel for what they need to do. And the last thing I want to talk about is making sure you have logins for everything for when you do separate and you can't use your CAT card anymore. So a lot of people, when you are on Portal or whatever, you'll see the option to do a DS login. Make sure you make a DS login for yourself. So you're going to make your own username. It'll usually be your first, middle, last. So that's mine, my first, middle, last, and then you make up a password for it. Make sure you know your password, and make sure you change all of your settings so that it sends it to your personal email if you need to reset your password or whatever, and that way it's not sending it to your government email because you're not going to have access to it anymore. So the DS login you're going to use on eBenefits. eBenefits is going to be your go-to for everything pretty much. That's where you can check where your disability is to see where it's sitting at, where your claim is at. By the way, if you're still waiting, if you hit your separation date, you want to make sure you get a copy of your DD-214, the member copy 4, and it should have at the bottom what type of discharge you had, honorable, whatever. And then you're going to take that copy and you're going to submit it on eBenefits because they need that document showing that you are now done with your service commitment. And the DS login is also going to be for the VA site. Right now, the VA site, a lot of the things on there, the links refer you back to eBenefits, or some of the stuff isn't working. So hopefully they have that fixed. But pretty much everything you need to do is on eBenefits. And another little tidbit, if you're like me and you're voluntarily separating early for whatever thing you're doing, if you're doing the pregnancy childbirth thing like I did, make sure your section, your personnel section at your base is taking care of your records, because I just ran into the situation where the VA wasn't showing my end of service date, which should have been 30 August, and it was saying invalid. So I had to call all these people to get my stuff fixed, because what they did on base was they deleted my entire profile in the DEER system instead of updating what my separation date was going to be. So this messed up all my stuff with the VA. I had to try and get my date fixed, and what they did on my base here was they just changed the date to a different date, and they didn't correct it still, so I'm still waiting for that to get fixed. But make sure all your stuff's good to go before you get out, especially if you are married, if your spouse is active duty as well. So my husband is still active duty, and that's another reason why I'm running into issues, is because then I had to get a dependent ID, but they didn't fix my profile correctly, that my service commitment was ended instead of fixing it. They just deleted my information. Anyways, I don't know why that stuff happened. And then while you're in TAPS, they should tell you to do this. If they don't, you're going to want to get on the VA site and apply for VA healthcare. It's a little form that you fill out. It's like 1040 easy or whatever. You'll do that because whatever disabilities that they will grant you, you're going to be able to make appointments for that stuff. And then I believe that you can do other appointments. I haven't done all my research yet, but I believe you can do other appointments through them too if you need to for disabilities that weren't granted for you. And my biggest piece of info, I guess, again, would be going back to making sure you make appointments for everything that you need if you haven't. So if you haven't, like, a known thing that you already talked to with your doctor and it's not in your records, you want to make sure it's documented, because I ran into that issue too where I had an appointment for something and I claimed it on my disability and they came back and they're like, this isn't documented anywhere. I'm like, I definitely had that documented. There's an appointment for it right here, but I didn't have a follow-up or whatever where the doctor and I discussed it that was documented. So, but those are the main things: records, healthcare stuff, and your DS login and everything. So hopefully this is helpful to someone. I'm going to try and do some other little informational things about some of the issues that I've had to go through. If anyone's interested in learning about voluntary separations or medical evaluation boards, from what I know, from what I had to go through, or anything else dealing with the VA. I'm still learning on that, but it's a lot of information that you have to get from people you know, or figure it out on your own, because there's not a whole lot on the internet for it. And when you get your disability rating, you're going to want to look at what state you're in to see if they have any sort of benefits for veterans. So, for example, Utah, if you're rated for your disability, you can claim it on your property taxes. So essentially, they do a specific equation, and you will get a certain amount off your property taxes depending on what percentage disability you are. So if you're at 100%, then depending on how much your property taxes are, you might not have to pay property taxes at all. And also, if you have, I'm going to do another video on this, if you have multiple disabilities, so I have like a bunch, but some of them are only 10%. If you have a bunch of disabilities, they don't add up. So if you have one that's 60, 50, it's not 110, okay? I think that one takes you to 80 or 72. 80. I think it's 80. So the VA, when they rate you your disabilities, it doesn't automatically... The first percentage is what that full percentage is, and then the next one is cut down. And they have a chart to do it. And I could do an example of mine at some point, because mine is really confusing. Alright, well, I hope this is helpful to someone. You're always welcome to hit me up with a message if you have a question. Alright, have a good one, guys.